In this example, we're setting up a basic Next.js application using functional components. We import React and the use router hook from Next router. Inside our homepage component, we define a fetch data function. This function asynchronously fetches data from an API and returns the JSON response. The homepage component renders a simple welcoming message. This setup is our starting point for exploring different data fetching strategies with the app router in Next.js. Stay tuned to see how this evolves. Now, we're diving into server-side data fetching in Next.js. Here, we import getServerSide props and create a component, server-side page, which receives data as a prop. This data is displayed on the page. The magic happens in getServerSide props, an async function that fetches data from an API before the page renders. This function runs on each request, ensuring fresh data is fetched every time. It's a great approach for dynamic content and enhances SEO, as the content is already rendered when the page loads. In this example, we're exploring static generation with getStaticProps. We've created a static page component that receives pre-fetched data as a prop. The data is then rendered on the page. With getStaticProps, we fetch data at build time, not at request time. This means the data is fetched once during the build process and used for all requests, making the page super fast. This method is ideal for pages where data doesn't change often, like blog posts or product listings, and it's great for SEO too. Here, we're diving into incremental static regeneration, a game changer in Next.js. Our ISR page component displays data fetched at build time, similar to static generation. The key difference lies in the getStaticProps function. By adding a revalidate key with a value of 10 seconds, Next.js will attempt to regenerate the page in the background when a request comes in after 10 seconds have passed since the last generation. This approach is perfect for content that updates occasionally, combining the speed of static generation with the freshness of server-side rendering. Now let's look at client-side data fetching in Next.js. In this client-side page component, we use the useState hook to manage our data state and the useEffect hook to fetch data after the component mounts. The fetch data function makes an API call and updates the state with the response. This approach is great for data that needs to be fetched per user or for dynamic content that changes frequently. It allows the initial page to load quickly, with data populating as soon as it's retrieved. Here we introduce SWR, a powerful hook for data fetching in Next.js. In this example, we use the useSWR hook, which requires a fetcher function. This function simply calls the API and returns the JSON response. The useSWR hook then fetches data from the given URL and handles caching, revalidation, and error states seamlessly. Notice how we handle loading and error states elegantly. SWR is perfect for scenarios where data needs to be frequently updated, offering a balance between performance and up-to-date content. Error handling is a critical aspect of data fetching in Next.js. In this example, we use getServerSide props for server-side data fetching with error handling. We try fetching data from an API and check if the response is successful. If not, we throw an error. In the component, we check for errors and render an error message if present. This approach ensures that users get meaningful feedback in case of an issue, and it helps maintain a good user experience even when things go wrong. Optimizing data fetching can significantly improve your Next.js app's performance. Here, we're using an LRU, least recently used, cache to store fetched data. In getServerSide props, before fetching new data, we check if the data for the current URL is already in the cache. If it is, we use the cached data instead of making a new API call. This technique reduces the number of requests to the server, resulting in faster response times and a smoother user experience, especially for frequently accessed data. Securing data fetching is crucial, especially for sensitive information. In this example, we use NextAuth for user authentication. The secure page component only displays data if the user is logged in. The getServerSide props function checks for an active session using getSession. If a user isn't authenticated, we return a null user, prompting a login. For authenticated requests, we fetch data using an authorization header containing the user's access token. This pattern ensures that sensitive data is only accessible to authenticated users, maintaining security and privacy. In advanced data fetching patterns, we often need to handle multiple requests. Here's an example where we fetch data from two different sources using async, await. Inside useEffect, we define fetchData, an async function that fetches the first set of data, updates the state, then fetches the second set. This sequential approach ensures the second fetch occurs only after the first completes. It's a common pattern in scenarios like dependent data fetching, where the result of one call determines the parameters of the next.